Broadcasting live from Godzilla Edge of History, this is Pop Culture Reference, your one-stop reference for all things pop culture. I'm one of your hosts, young Wyatt Russell.
And I'm one of your other hosts, young John Goodman?
Wait, that doesn't make sense anymore. Wait, what? That's okay.
I mean, hey, whatever. It's flashback John Goodman. I don't know, however you want to say that. I'm excited that he's just involved with this, if I'm being honest.
Me too. I'm sure he came in for one day on a green screen and got a nice little paycheck. And
they just scanned his face in from Skull Island. They just had the footage or something.
That wouldn't even honestly surprise me very much. But we're not talking about Monarch Legacy of Monsters yet, Seamus. We do have some news to get through, and we have a decent amount of news to get through, I'll say.
And starting off with some pretty exciting news. I know me and you are both pretty big fans of Tom Cruise's work, and he has just signed a deal with Warner Brothers to produce and star in some yet-to-be-announced franchises and titles at Warner Brothers. I am pretty excited. I know there's already a few rumors going around about some Tom Cruise-specific projects that might be getting, sequels or new projects to be attached to, but I know it's pretty solid news all around, I would say, that he's getting involved. He's always a very good, dedicated producer when he works really closely with films like the stuff that Warner Brothers puts out.
Well, I'm very curious to see. I'm a little bit surprised that he made a deal with Zaslav with how, he has been semi-vocal about his disappointment with films getting shelved and things like that, and I wonder how much influence he's going to have over other aspects of Warner Brothers. For example, he's going to have an office on the Warner Brothers lot, and despite his decades-long relationship with Paramount, that's never something that he has had on their lot. So it seems like he's really here to stay, and we will certainly get a little bit more into it during our pop culture reference, which is going to dive into the history of Cruise's relationship with studios.
But coming up next, something to drag our hopes and dreams of our favorite Star Wars franchise stuff down. The Mandalorian and Grogu movie, which is just not my favorite title at all. That has been officially announced, and I have about as much hope for something like that as I do for the rest of the seasons of The Mandalorian at this point. So I'm not sure if they're going to be able to pull something like this off this early feeling. I know it's so many years later, but it feels a little like they're jumping the gun here.
I agree, and I'm of two minds about it, because I'm not interested in this. I don't want this. I do not think it will do as well as they think it will. However, I see the merit in them going, hey, here are the two most successful characters that our franchise has seen in literal decades. Maybe we should consider, because I like bringing Star Wars back to the theater. That is a good thing. You and I say that every time we talk about a Star Wars thing on this show. So the idea of them going, okay, we've got these uber successful characters and we want to bring them into like the most mainstream Star Wars can be, I appreciate that, but I do not think it will be good. So I think that we're going to the theater to see it no matter what, unfortunately. So it'll be interesting to see how they can pull that off. We often, with these Mando seasons that we cover, Mando Bros famously, there's no direction. They set up things that they ultimately abandon pretty much a few episodes into a season. Putting it on the big screen, maybe they will be forced to make something like this matter a little more. I'm looking forward to feeling the ante be upped in this kind of realm, this timeline that they have set up so much stuff with. Make it something just interesting and cool, big event. I'll still probably get the Star Wars tingles from it once we get to the big spaceship battle climax against Cyborg Gideon. I don't know what they're gonna do for a conflict or whatever, but I'll be interested to see it, even if it is bad. I mean, Favreau's directing it, which once upon a time would have been a good thing, and I don't know, man. I don't know.
It'll be something to watch out for. I feel like at the same time as I feel like they might find a way to put like a Rogue One kind of spin on things where it's like it is its own kind of sectioned off adventure away from bigger names. You know, we'll get CGI Luke Skywalker on the big screen and it'll be the most noticeable thing ever on a massive IMAX screen, or it'll feel like the early days of Mando where he felt like his own character and he wanted his own things that didn't have to do with every plot arc in the Clone Wars at one point. So I don't know. I do not know.
I don't know when Ahsoka and Thrawn and Ezra and Sabine and Bo-Katan and Boba Fett.
Dude, remember when they were like, in 7 years we're going to have a movie that'll culminate everything, and now they're just like, maybe we'll just do it now. Maybe we'll do a culmination movie every couple of years now, and it's going to be awful.
I really hope not. I don't know. I think this shows that they've learned all the wrong lessons from the Marvel bubble bursting.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. We'll have to see. But for the second week in a row, Seamus, it was our inaugural one last week, but we do, of course, have an Amazon attack.
Warning, Amazon attack. You're in danger. Pop culture reference.
Several hundred people are going to be laid off as Amazon Studios and MGM are consolidating, which is exactly what we predicted would happen back when Amazon bought MGM, 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah, when we had weird thoughts about Bond things that were happening at the same time.
Yeah, that's true also, but boy howdy, is this not even a little bit surprising, and they said that this wasn't going to happen, and guess what? It did happen, and it's super disappointing, and it's, once again, not surprising.
Yeah, very sadly unsurprising. I mean, I feel like we have these news alerts so often, and at least 30% of the time, it's just like massive wave of layoffs, and it's going to just, the content is going to suffer, the quality of things is going to suffer. Nothing is ever gained by the artists or the consumers. It's just big corporate lies being pulled off here to make sure that their bottom line is fluffed up.
Speaking of Disney danger.
Oh, back into the Disney danger. God. Talk about back to back.
I'm rocking back and forth in my chair like anybody could see that.
It'll come through.
But more layoffs. Pixar will be laying off as much as 20% of their employees in 2024, which I understand that Pixar movies have not done particularly well these last few years, but this seems to me more like a self-fulfilling prophecy that, of course, they haven't done well because they've not been promoted well, they've not been released in movie theaters. There's been nothing but the deck stacked against Pixar over the last several years. And, I mean, 20% of an animation studio, that is massive numbers. It kind of feels like back in 2011 when John Lasseter was the head of Walt Disney Animation, and he released the Winnie the like... It was like a 70-minute Winnie the Pooh 2D animated movie the same week as Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. And he was like, well, that movie did super bad, so this is a reason to shutter the entire 2D animation department at Disney. And this feels like that to me, where they're just like, oh, well, we did a really bad job releasing and marketing and distributing these films, so obviously the answer is massive layoffs.
Yeah, it's a the producer's style, like, planned failure to gain money in a way that really screws a ton of people in the meantime. It's definitely not great, but I mean, what has even been coming out of Pixar in the last, like, I've surely not kept up with any of that stuff, I don't think. I'm trying to even remember the last Pixar movie.
Luca, Turning Red.
Soul was solid, but I think that was probably the last thing. That was like COVID streaming release, right?
Yep.
Disney Plus.
Well, and that's the thing, Turning Red and Luca, even though they could have come out in theaters, were also sent to streaming.
I see.
The only theatrical Pixar movie I believe that has come out since the pandemic was Lightyear, which was bad, and nobody saw and nobody liked. So
that is such a bummer. I used to love a good Pixar movie from time to time, but man, I mean, yeah, it's like you said, it seems like they're it's planned to ramp down as long as nobody's going feverish for like Elemental or whatever.
Oh, I forgot about Elemental. I didn't even see Elemental.
Nobody cared about. Like, it came out and then I was like fully unaware until weeks later when somebody was making jokes about it.
Yeah, they just don't know what to do with that studio anymore. It's sad to say that I yearn for the days of Coco and Incredibles 2, because like it's not like Pixar was even in their glory days then, but I mean Coco's wonderful, but
and Incredibles, I mean, they had what seemed like a little bit of a renaissance going for themselves, and then it just turned to like, I don't know, it seemed like the things that were coming out were a little more boring to at least me, an adult man who's been following the Pixar stuff since I was a kid, but it wasn't grabbing me. It didn't seem like there was any real reason to not just go back to the good classics, if anything. So, I mean, we'll see what this 20% does for them. I couldn't imagine that it's going to help the quality of what they're trying to pump out here.
No, this seems like maybe an effort to consolidate everything under the Disney animation banner, which would be a real loss. I mean, Pixar is such a valuable creative place, and I mean that took a big hit when Disney purchased them outright, almost 20 years ago now, but yeah. Even more so, I think, like to lose them, to dilute the brand to a point that they're basically just, also Disney would really be a travesty, and I think that seems to be where we're heading.
Well, it's only the first couple weeks of the year, man. We'll see what more Disney dangers come our way throughout the rest.
I shudder to think, Seamus, but should we move on over to some other giant behemoth monsters that don't care about human life?
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Let's do it. For today's main segment, we are doing the entire first season of Apple TV Plus's Monarch, Legacy of Monsters. Surprising is how I'll start this. This is the first bit of like real Godzilla content I've come to since our Zillathon, our episode 150 with Alex. And, I've dabbled here and there. I tried out Godzilla Singular Point and a few of the other animated things I've taken a look at, but this was very interesting. I'll say we were both obviously drawn in by the Russell boys, who are playing very interesting, the same character in different eras of this story, but overall I was actually really impressed by how they did pretty much everything and fitting it very comfortably into the legendary, the Monarch verse of Godzilla stuff.
I was ready going into this to be like, the first few episodes I was like, I just wish this weren't in the legendary verse so that they could do whatever they wanted, but most of the show they're able to navigate well enough that I don't mind at all. And obviously there are some major tie-ins with characters that are from the movies, namely from Kong Skull Island, which is my favorite legendary movie, certainly.
For as close to the 2013, the initial Godzilla reboot for legendary, was that 2014? For as close as it, and I don't love that movie. I don't even remember much of that movie, if I'm being honest. It's been so long since I dove into that one, but I kind of loved how closely related it amplifies a lot of what I remember being not a great Godzilla movie in that original one, with how they treat that time frame. They kind of jump forward enough to like throw in more insane things in the actual installments of the film sequels, but this felt, I was kind of locked in with how much they gave to it being in 2015 specifically, like not very far removed from the emergence of Titans.
The big difference, I think, being there are actually characters that are interesting in this show. These are far and away the most interesting characters in any of the legendary stuff, and it's not just because it's television and they have more time. I think from jump they are fundamentally more interesting. Specifically Lee Shaw, who is played by both Kurt and Wyatt Russell, and Keiko Mary Yamamoto are great characters. I think those are transcendent characters.
Yeah, big fan. And I started this, and there's quite a bit of time jumping back and forth to do like a flashback storyline with those characters, and I was like, well, I can already see myself getting bogged down in my viewing experience by how they're going to jump back and forth, but it added so much more than I thought it ever would to the overall story, and the character of Lee Shaw, who I love so much. It's honestly one of my favorite legendary characters of anything that they have put out, period.
Yeah, I think probably he and Keiko are probably my two favorites, period. Like, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of other great characters in this. I enjoy the little Randa kids, Kate and Kentaro.
Yeah, again, a sibling thing that I was like, well, I know where this is going, and I was wrong. I was so happy to be wrong and unannoyed by the relationship that they end up developing throughout the season.
Yes, and even characters that would usually be annoying, and I think Legendary has done versions of that are annoying, are not annoying. Namely,
I know you're...
Tim.
Yeah, buddy,
Love
I do.
Tim.
Dude, Columbo is zaddy. This guy is kind of the best. He's like kind of handsome and competent, but also funny and a little bit bumbling. Not bumbling enough to be like the guy that's running around with Eleven and Russell from Deadpool 2 in whatever movie that was, but like actually a fun character who, you know, the allegiances, you shuffle around a few times and you're not really sure you have a read on a few characters, but the way they do Tim, I very much hope I see him in some movies sometime.
And I really have said multiple times on this show before, I have very little patience for Monarch in the movies. I think it's a boring organization. Like, see, the Meg has the like shadow monster hunting company, but they never do it. Like, they never bother with any of the politics. That doesn't matter. That's just a means to an end for those movies. But in the Legendary movies, they're always like, Monarch is the most important organization in the world, and I don't care. And this is the first time in a show called Monarch you would hope that they found a way to make it interesting, and they did. It's the first time that I've cared about Monarch, and I think they very tangibly find a way to reconcile the Monarch from Kong Skull Island and the Monarch from the rest of the movies.
Oh man, I have never, when I wrapped up that finale the other day, I've never wanted to start throwing on Legendary movies more. And I never want to, except for pretty much Skull Island, like you were saying. I'm ready for like kind of a roundup again of all of those because of how well they were able to kind of fold in the stuff that, like you were saying, definitely annoyed us as we were trying to get into these regular Godzilla mega blockbuster releases that they've been trying to get people on for years now. But I think for maybe the first time that I have ever been a part of it, a television show tie-in is going to actually add a ton to whatever next installment that it might affect. For me, at least, as a viewer who kind of binged this show over 3 days and kind of loved every second of it.
I am really shocked. There are definitely some plot points that I did not care for. Kiersey Clemens is great. I think she's a great actor. I do not care for that character or whatever stupid crap is going on with her backstory. Like that.
Is that May? Is that who you're talking about?
That's May.
Yeah.
Does not work for me at all, unfortunately.
We'll get it. Once we hit the spoiler dam, we will, you know, there's some stuff towards the end that feels like they were just like, all right, we got to wrap this up. Let's throw this in there. Let's figure out how this character fits in.
Yeah, we'll talk in spoilers about how, like, some of that stuff has through lines that I'm like, okay, I understand why this was in the show, but I am still like, I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
I found her, like, she was the only time that the human drama had me being like, you know, there's, like, monsters, right? Do we really need to do this right now?
Man.
Like,
yeah, I know what you mean. And I mean, speaking of, the monster to human ratio, and we'll definitely get into the details of that once we get over the curtain here, but I was left a little bit wanting. You know, I'm a giant monster fan, and we did get very interesting and cool ways that they executed that in the scale of what this show was trying to do to fill in these time gaps between the major installments, but I would have liked some more monsters, my friend. I think that is not the craziest thing to want out of a Godzilla television show, but I guess it is technically the Monarch show, and they definitely delivered on that in a way that was satisfying despite the lack of monsters.
I think that they pace the monsters well enough that I don't mind. Like you said, obviously with budgetary constraints, you're just not going to be able to have the giant monster fights that we've come to expect from these kinds of movies. But the character drama is compelling enough. And I said this to you the other day, I was pleasantly surprised that by the time I would really get to a point with a show where I'd be like, we really need a monster to come through, usually there would be one. So
that is true. They're the way that they use them when they do use them, it works very well. And like you're saying, it's, not all at once, plenty of good like flashbacks and shorter scenes with the monsters that feel, we do get a little taste of Skull Island, we get a little taste of San Francisco in 2014. We get plenty of interesting moments, but I guess I really just want to watch more Godzilla movies. I know we have so many to get under our belt, but this was a great little appetizer if you want to get into the more human-y stuff of Monarch.
And honestly, if you are not a person who watches the Legendary movies, who cares about the Legendary movies, I would still recommend this show. And I was pretty hesitant about where I would fall on that until I finished the full season. And I think it delivers strong enough storytelling and compelling enough characters that it is genuinely worth watching. And I don't think you're going to get super lost with any timeline stuff if you aren't familiar. Especially, what Godzilla is, what the premise is. I think, honestly, probably the movie that you would need to watch the most for season 1 would be Skull Island, weirdly enough.
Yeah, I guess you're not wrong. They lay it out, the G-Day. I kind of like the introduction of the phrase G-Day. Is this where they throw that in there for the first time?
I've seen King of the Monsters and Kong versus Godzilla one time each, and I do not care to revisit them, so I cannot tell you, Seamus.
I'm making you watch all those with me, by the way. I'm gonna make you watch even the bad ones, especially the bad ones.
I don't hate King of the Monsters, but I really did not care for Kong versus Godzilla, dude.
I need to revisit with our new Godzilla brains. They inserted the mech brains into our bodies here, and we're gonna know what all the references are, man. Come on.
Charles Dance put us in the Pacific Rim helmets, and
yeah, sure. Charles Dance put us in the. For as much as I'm talking about giant monsters, I've still never seen the Pacific Rim movies either of them.
I saw the first one years and years ago, and I don't remember very much about it. But they have it doesn't matter. I'm not going down this rabbit hole. I think it's time to call spoilers.
Yes. Oh God, yes. And we're getting into Pacific Rim. Let's call spoilers on Monarch.
So, where to start, Seamus? Where would you like to begin?
Where would we like to begin? The 50s flashbacks are phenomenal. I really love how. Let's just start timeline-wise at this point, I guess. Wyatt Russell, Anders Holm, the whole Monarch setup where we get to see the more baby steps between Project Monarch being a military operation through Wyatt Russell to this more scientific preservational style Monarch that is the ideal of what it is. I thought it was fantastic. The whole Bikini Atoll nuclear tests as that famous attempt on Godzilla. Yeah, it was awesome to have that on the beach insight to that. They mention it, from time to time, that was America's first, that's when we realized that we had no chance to stop it or whatever, but to have them on the beaches watching it go down. I loved all of that all the way through.
And that, especially those first few episodes, I was in a place where I was I really wish this were just the 50s show.
Oh yeah, honestly.
Not that I don't like the stuff in the modern day, but it's certainly less compelling to start. But they are able to tie everything together so well in the last few episodes that I really am into the structure of this season. And again, I think the chemistry between Wyatt Russell and Mary Yamamoto is super palpable. I've never seen her in anything before. She's incredible. She should be in kind of like Wyatt Russell should be in everything.
They should be in everything together, maybe, because they were electric together.
And Anders Holm is good in this. Again, he's playing John Goodman's character from Kong Skull Island. I don't really see that casting choice, but I think he is good in the show. I see the way he's written is a good starting point for Goodman's character, because you can see over the course of those flashbacks how he goes from a well-meaning, curious guy who had this awful thing happen to him and is trying to figure it out, to a man obsessed, and then a man broken by the death of his wife and an absentee father, and seeing him slip into that really as more of a background character in this series was, I think, very well done and very rewarding, and it made me want to go back and think about Skull Island in that context. Not that obviously they had any idea that any of that was going to be later put onto that character.
Well, it would still be interesting, the retroactive justifications that they're doing with Anders Holm, but then we get towards the end of the season, we get a couple time jump, Captain America style experiments going on here, and we kind of miss that entire. And I guess that is us. Like, having already seen Skull Island and knowing what his whole deal is there, but, like, it would have been, I would have liked to have seen him grow into John Goodman a little bit more.
Yeah, and, I mean, they've left enough. I think that there's some very, very strategic time jumps in here where they've left room for things. Another thought I'm going, because like you said, when they go down into the Wrinkle in Time world in the center of the earth where time works differently, and that is why Kurt Russell is 100 years old, and that's why and we'll get into the finale a little bit more. I do think that they're very specifically leaving things open for, like, there's not only time jumps where they could go and put in, like, a John Goodman story that doesn't have Wyatt Russell in it or whatever, but also I keep thinking, if they want to bring any of the Skull Island characters back, that is the way they can do it.
Very true,
If you want Brie Larson and Tom Hiddleston in a new movie with Millie Bobby Brown, I think that and especially the fact that they reveal that there is a base on Skull Island, I like, it's a very convenient, not to say that they will do that, but I think I can see the wheels turning a little bit there.
I mean, just the sentence that you just said of Tom Hiddleston, Brie Larson, and Millie Bobby Brown, you're like, executives hear that and they're like seeing money already, like they want to do that anyway. And that's probably the stepping stones that we're getting to here a little bit more with now everyone is a weird age and they're all kind of here together suddenly at the same time. We're gonna, they're gonna figure something out there to make it all fold in together, and we'll get a Mando Grogu movie style with all that stuff together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I even want that to happen, even though I would love to see those characters come back in some way. I would be much more interested in it's the 70s again and here's more monster hunting. I just don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think that if that was gonna happen, it would have happened by now, I think.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know if Monarch is a popular show, really, or if this is kind of reinvigorating people before the movie, the next Kong Godzilla movie. I feel like it might be, like you said, it could have the potential, Monarch, to draw in less Godzilla-focused people and kind of reinvigorate the fan base a little bit for the upcoming whatever slate of however many things they're doing.
I said this on the podcast at the time, that it struck me that Godzilla vs. Kong seemed like it was kind of supposed to be the end of all this. There's no big tease for anything coming later. There's no, it's like Kong has his happy ending. Godzilla and Kong have their happy end. Like, none of the characters are in any weird spot. And I think that movie made way more money than any of the other MonsterVerse movies during the pandemic. And I think that now we're kind of seeing them. This is a new transitional phase for them where they're figuring out what this is going to be. Because this is also the only successful cinematic universe, really, other than Marvel.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, what other things are even on the table that have such weird history and like potential for expansion in the internal lore?
So, and again, I don't want to get bogged down in cinematic universes and all that stuff, but I think that this is like a very intentional. They're feeling out where to go from here with this show. And if this, I was not inspired by the Godzilla x Kong trailer, but if they can get more of what they have going on in here, I would be very happy about that.
Yeah, I want a season 2 with, even more in between flashbacks, perhaps, kind of like we were saying, fill in the Anders home gap while everybody's lost around. Bring in some of this human drama energy into whatever the next one is going to be. I truly couldn't care, even if you paid me, about Millie Bobby Brown and her mom who wants to destroy the earth and all that.
Her mom has been dead for 2 movies, Seamus.
I know, but like the way that old Lee Shaw is like, he has a similar, like, they are the apex beings on this planet, we need to like work together in a way that I actually can see and a little bit get behind. But Millie Bobby Brown's mom, who has a name, and she's in all those scary movies, and I'm sure I'll remember it one day.
Vera Farmiga.
Of course. She kind of just sucked. I didn't like the way that they tried to shoehorn that in, and she's like super righteous about everything. It was kind of the worst, but
it's almost like those movies aren't written well.
Yeah, but no, they reeled it back. They were like, all right, we have the kernel of a good idea here, and we're just going to give it to Kurt Russell to actually follow through.
Kurtle.
We have a Kurtle of... Ugh, gross. Never mind. That's a grosser way to say that.
I mean, he's terrific when he goes like full Colonel Kurtz at the end.
Yes, exactly. But then also like the flashbacks and the growth that we get to see him. They like imprison and drug him for decades, which is kind of the saddest thing ever. Like I thought we were gonna get like, and then I was on the run for years before Monarch caught up to me. But no, they just get him instantly. It's so sad.
But I think again, it feels a little like they maybe strategically left. Like it just jumps from him being Wyatt Russell to Kurt Russell.
There's a
and I'm like,
time
he
in between. Yeah, exactly.
Escaped there, and
They
maybe
do
somebody came
mention
to see him. And...
The director of Monarch is like, it's been years since your last escape attempt. What made you, try it again or whatever? Like he could have absconded, found the dad for a little while again.
Exactly. So I'm not saying that all of that's going to happen, but again, I think that's another example of their convenient time skipping where they're like, well, there's just this decades long period where we're not really going to touch that. The turn of him from being like, I'm part of the heroes and we're all here together, to the adversary of the show is something that I was afraid was going to get really tired really fast, but they really only do it for one episode. Yeah, because then they all get sucked down into the world between worlds there. And
there's also a couple episodes where you're like unsure a little bit. You're not sure, like, oh, is this lady who looks like the lady from Titan, is she really double crossing? Like, who's her allegiance to? And like, why is
Oh, I don't care about that character at all, though. I wish I did. That's the one where I'm like, this feels like this. Yep, she's from the Legendary verse, all right.
Yeah, Kurt Russell needed like a henchman, like a henchman who's also kind of a little bit in charge until Kurt Russell swaggers onto screen.
The only thing I do like really is that she and Tim are together at the beginning, and they're like, he's less comfortable with her doing bad guy stuff, and she's ruthless and she doesn't care about human life and and then at the end she does save his life, which I like that beat.
Yeah, it's not bad at all there. I mean, Tim as a character, I would like to maybe circle back a little bit more. Everything in my brain was telling me what kind of character that was going to be, and then the globe-trottiness that we kind of referenced up top with the Edge of History, the way that this is that formula, the National Treasure show, but done right in a way that there is the sillier characters, but the again, same thing with pretty much every other main Monarch character. You're not sure as you're bouncing around how they are actually, how evil are they? Are they maybe for the greater good in a way that bad guys often say that they are, but are not? I enjoyed him a lot, and I was so sure that they were going to kill him by the end of this.
Me too.
I was saying my prayers for Tim pretty much since the map on the wall bit,
Yeah. Well, I thought they just unceremoniously killed him in that helicopter for a while. I was like, wow, that guy is gone.
Oh, yeah, they go, no survivors from that helicopter crash. I was like, oh, okay. All right, I guess.
Because at that point, he is much more of an adversary. Like, he's not really that very likable yet. And so it feels like, well, they could just, that's his comeuppance, and he gets got, and then later we'll get the big bad lady or whatever, who also doesn't die. Nope, not a lot of people die. I'm kind of surprised by that, actually.
I mean, we only have Kurt Russell dies? Is that the only real major one?
And once again, I think that's a great ending for that character, and I think he should be dead. He could just be alive down there. It's like, he could just not.
Very true. They could just get those hovercrafts from Skull Island and be like, oh yeah, we have these now, and we could just not do the time thing.
That's why I hate that stupid movie. Why is everything science fiction now? Like the appeal of those earlier ones is it's monsters in a world that is not prepared for them. It's normal monster stuff. Like normal world, giant monsters.
Yes.
Great. This show is like that. Godzilla 2014, Kong Skull Island, to a lesser extent, King of the Monsters. But when they get into all, like, they've got hovercrafts and they've got all this, like, they've got the magic dome from Hunger Games that they're keeping Kong in and all that, I just hate that stuff. And I think in Mecha like this, that is the reason they make that jump is because that's not a universe that can sustain Mechagodzilla, but guess what? Here he is. Which brings us to the fact that that is the company, right? That is
Yeah,
the
Apex
Mechagodzilla company.
Cybernetics.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes,
Oh,
sir.
my
Yes, it
goodness.
is. And you know famously, as we learned during our Godzilla-thon, who was the first giant monster to get a mecha version? That's King Kong, baby.
Interesting.
I think they're gearing up for it. I think that was what the ultimate tease was, is that, hey, Mechagodzilla didn't work. Let's send in his real adversary in mecha form, King Kong.
It's 2017 at the end of the show.
Oh,
which
right,
is
yeah.
2
Where does
years,
that... Fuck.
2 years before King of the Monsters. And I think that's like again, really convenient place for them to be in, where they've got just some time to do whatever they want. Also the fact that they're on Skull Island, away from the rest of the world. They don't have the Marvel problem where, well, if this happened, wouldn't we have heard about that? Wouldn't the Avengers be there?
Right, yeah, they're a little more isolated. Maybe, I mean, I wouldn't hate a Monarch Season 2 where it's almost exclusively set on, modern-day Skull Island.
That's the dream, and that's also where I'm starting to see, like, Tom Hiddleston's there. Whittling a stick.
Yes, baby! Why not? Why not?
Because, okay, this is a really stupid timeline thing. When, during Skull Island, does John Goodman go have his little solo adventure out to the coast
to toss a bag?
Yeah.
I would have to rewatch Skull Island and then just, like, he'll be off screen and I'll be like, he's running from a big spider at the moment. That's fine.
Because, I mean, the implication is that that's around the time that they see the big spider in the movie.
Yeah.
I would think, but I'm just like, I think that's a very strange... it makes sense, but it's almost like, why didn't they just have him not on Skull Island? Why didn't they just have him, like, leave it in a chest or something somewhere? And I know it's because they wanted to connect back to it, but, I think that's a very interesting choice.
I know that they're playing with fire a little bit with the sci-fi-e-ness. They've got Apex in here. They've got the time travel angle, or the time distortion angle, however you want to say that. They still kept it kind of close to the vest with how they got Wyatt Russell into that center of the earth area with the old 50s tech and the army, the military being all super involved.
They send him into the rift. I don't understand. Like, what do you mean?
No, I'm saying like the lag, like it wasn't the flippy hovercraft from Skull Island. It was still very much felt like, oh yeah, they're just like launching these guys in a shuttle thing into the rift or whatever. It felt right.
I like that it feels like an Apollo mission, which is
yes,
what
exactly.
This stuff should feel like, and I hate that's why I hate that everything's just so floaty and fluttery and easy. There is something that's very satisfying and exciting about makeshift, like less advanced technology.
The gamma ray, what do they call it?
The gamma ray,
the spoofer or whatever. They're like making the fake gamma rays to attract them, and it's just like this giant ball of wires in a rowboat in the water, and you're like, that's exactly what that would look like. That it looks perfect.
Did you also spend a lot of the finale thinking, because we haven't talked about this, Keiko has been alive down there for 50 years, and you think about how every single man in her life absolutely failed her by finding that gamma signal. Like, her husband went off to Skull Island, and Lee, who was in love with her, didn't figure it out. I mean, he wasn't a scientist, but still, and her son, who was obsessed with all the Hollow Earth stuff, didn't figure out that there was a signal coming from down there. And I'm just like, guys, it's so frustrating, because I understand why she doesn't want to come back, because who is she coming back to? All the men who let her down for literal decades?
Yeah, it's weird to think about the timing on that, because you have her disappearance in that like reactor place in the late 50s-ish. And then you have her husband like doing Rift stuff in the 70s successfully with these vehicles, like all of this stuff that for every reason should be like, oh, why isn't John Goodman talking about his disappeared wife? Like, even if there was a chance, he's a crazy guy. Like, why wouldn't he take resources to go do some crazy rescue mission even if it, whatever. I agree. It feels like she's just like forgotten as a new character who they just wrote into this universe for this TV show. Feels like she was forgotten pretty instantly.
And I guess, to be fair, Russell doesn't get out until the 80s, which means that she cannot find and repurpose the gamma until at least the 80s. So John Goodman's been dead a decade at that point. But still, and I guess Kurt Russell has also been imprisoned immediately afterward.
Yes, true.
But her son, dude, come on. Like, if you're gonna be a deadbeat dad to two different families and still not find your missing mom.
Yeah, wow. What a strange thing that the entire show felt like it was about finding the dad, and he really didn't matter that much at the end. I guess maybe the point was that the two siblings who never knew about each other, they are growing their relationship and finding out, you know, what they mean to each other in that without the father and his absent ways. But I felt like there wasn't really much of a payoff. Even in the end when he's reunited with his young mother, it feels weird that he doesn't matter at all, pretty much.
Well, there's two big recurring motifs, which are, I mean, it's not like they're subtle, which are duality and like the entire opening credits and the Monarch symbol and the fact that it's two timelines, and it's all about, and the fact there are two families, everything. There's two of everything. And the separation of worlds and the separation of the self and who are you to different people, like that is all very present. Who are you at, like, are you the same person? That's brought up pretty much every episode. How you are two different people after you go through a big event. Like, whether that is a school bus full of children not getting saved by Superman and falling off the Golden Gate Bridge, or being time travel Captain America and then stuck in a retirement community, quote unquote, for 40 years, or, you know, like May having literal two different names, two different lives, two different backgrounds. So you have that going on, which I think is interesting and well thought out. I don't think it says anything particularly interesting about it, but it is, like, kudos to the show for being about something, and it is about that. And it is also about the way that parents let down their children. That is a super recurring thing through the whole show, and specifically the Randa clan are just constantly letting each other down. And I think that's why it's so interesting that then I feel like not only is Hiro stuck letting down his children in this long line of letting your children down, but also he's retroactively letting down his mother by not finding her.
Oh, but now we have 3 generations of crazy people all together on Skull Island at the end there. It's weird that May asked... Was it weird to you that May asked them to call her May still? Even though that she's like, my past is clear and I can be who I want to be, and I'm maybe in love with the main lady.
Exactly. May's character is just weird. I don't think she has a definite point of view. Like, it's the most Edge of History also where they're woke, but we don't know how to write that, so...
Yeah, a little bit. And it feels like she was just the foot in the door for whatever company to turn into Apex, and...
Exactly.
We're gonna have her betray the group once or twice, which, whatever. It didn't feel like even much happened. They were still, like, friends with her. Like, we told her that we hate her now, but, like, where did she go? She's our friend. It's like, she probably left, dog. What do you mean?
And I hate that, again, she's like, it is a little bit of, like, she betrayed them because woke. And I'm like, guys, what? What do you mean? Like, but that is kind...
She pulled an Ant-Man and is like, corporate espionage for the greater good or whatever, and then
But it also is, it's very frustrating on top of all that, because a big appeal to me of the modern component of the show is these are just normal people that are caught up in a whirlwind adventure, except for May, who is like a active super on the run espionage person, hacker, and I'm like, this is stupid. It's so it elevates an element that doesn't need to be elevated. I think she would be a lot more interesting if she were just like a computer savvy person who, like, if they had given her a less interesting reason to run away, I think that actually would have been better for the character.
Yeah, I think they were trying to pile on. I mean, yeah, that's true. I mean, it seemed like they were coaching a reveal with the Apex stuff that, like, much like you when that happened, I was like, I'm pretty sure that that's the company that made Mechagodzilla, but it wasn't like oh my god, May was working for Apex the whole time. Like, it didn't really have the gravitas that they revealed that with at the end, I think.
No, clearly they thought that was going to be something. That's the most cinematic universe it gets in a negative way, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't as bad as could have been. I was still like, oh, sure, okay, we're crossing over. We need to do that, or else, the producers of this show, why did they even make that show? They made this to tie in, and as long as it wasn't as corny as it could have been, which I'm sure it could have been a lot worse. They come back and they're already in the hangar with Mecha Ghidorah's there or whatever. We're like, oh, well, whatever then.
I also don't super, I get that they need to have somebody at a bankroll at the end. That when it comes through with that, I'm like, okay, I guess it was worth doing all of that crap for this. I also don't feel like it's even a reveal at that point. Like, by the time they say Apex, you're like, okay, they're working on remote brain infusion or whatever.
Yeah.
It's clearly supposed to be that already. And so by the time she's like, Charles, dance on the phone. Yes, Ben. Yes, say hi to Abigail for me, Ben.
Christ, yeah. Oh, goodness gracious. Well, I am glad it was at least that subtle, if that's even saying anything. They weren't going as far over the top as any other Marvel thing would.
I overall, again, I liked the show a lot. It's just that one little subplot that doesn't really work for me. The rest of the stuff I thought was really compelling, and I like the characters, and I'm excited to see more of them. And I think that, May could be again, Kiersey Clemons, I think, is a really good actor, and I would like to see her given material that is worthy of her.
Well, season 2, we'll see. Who knows? Maybe it'll be our favorite long-running franchise tie-in show.
Well, we don't have many of those left, do we, Seamus?
No, we do not. Star Wars has let us down, except for Andor, pretty much.
And the Bad Batch.
And Young Jedi Adventures.
And Young Jedi. I love my boy Nubs.
Nubs versus Godzilla. Who do you think wins that? I mean, lightsabers are pretty strong.
Lightsabers are pretty strong, and Nubs is pretty strong. He can lift a bunch of boxes. He does it in the opening credits every week. Yeah, okay.
Dude, bunch of boxes.
Bunch of boxes. Godzilla, I think, same thing.
God. All right, I think we're spinning. I think that's it. I think Monarch was good as well. I can't wait for Nubs in season 2. I don't know what to say.
They would love Nubs on.
They
They've got Baby Kong in the new Kong, so.
Oh God, we're gonna have Baby Godzilla Nubs. Too. Well, we might as well bring him in from that weird one. Was that Final Wars?
That was Final Wars. That was your least favorite part of Final Wars.
It was bugging me. All right. Well, if they bring him back, it's same design. I'm in. I've changed my mind.
But why don't we go ahead and move on over to our pop culture reference, Seamus?
Let's do it.
For today's pop culture reference, we're going to be talking about the history of Tom Cruise's relationship with Hollywood studios. With the announcement of Tom Cruise's new relationship with Warner Bros. Discovery, we thought we'd take a look back at the movie star's storied relationships with various studios, and how those relate to today's news. While we won't spend much time on Cruise's early career, it is worth noting that Risky Business, the film that truly put him on the map, was a Warner Bros. Film. As any rising actor does, he worked with a variety of studios, seemingly prioritizing the talent he was working with over any meaningful studio loyalty.
The movie that made Tom Cruise a megastar as well as changed his dynamic with studios was Top Gun from Paramount Pictures, which was a cultural behemoth upon release. While he had no official deal with Paramount, the only star they had under contract at the time was Eddie Murphy, Cruise represented the studio as the host of the celebration of Paramount's 75th anniversary on a 1987 episode of Entertainment Tonight. He still continued to bounce around from studio to studio, with back-to-back turns in Rain Man for MGM and Born on the 4th of July for Universal, giving him more weight as a serious actor.
In 1993, he and his agent, Paula Wagner, formed the production company Cruise Wagner Productions. They signed a 3-year multi-picture deal with Paramount, which would be renewed and expanded several times over the next 14 years. The first film from this deal came in 1996 with Mission Impossible, which also starred Cruise in the lead role. Cruise Wagner produced 2 additional Mission Impossible films for Paramount, as well as other Cruise vehicles, Vanilla Sky and War of the Worlds. They did also produce for other studios during this time, including Minority Report for Fox and The Last Samurai for Warner Bros. In August 2006, a few months after the release of Mission Impossible 3, Paramount announced that they would end their 14-year relationship with Cruise due to his years-long campaign against psychiatry bolstered by the Church of Scientology, which included cruel language specifically targeted at Brooke Shields' handling of her postpartum depression, as well as Scientologists picketing the office of a psychiatrist whom Steven Spielberg had mentioned to Cruise.
In late 2006, following Cruise issuing an apology to Brooke Shields, Cruise Wagner announced a deal that gave them 30% stake of United Artists, meaning that they were now in charge of development and production for the studio. Wagner was named CEO while Cruise served as a producer and sometimes star. In the next 2 years, UA produced 2 films starring Cruise, Valkyrie, a World War II thriller that was a moderate critical and financial success, and Lions for Lambs, which was neither. The UA deal ultimately fell apart in 2008 when Wagner stepped down as CEO, with MGM eventually reacquiring its 100% stake in the studio. This also marked the end of Cruise Wagner Productions.
Cruise himself repartnered with Paramount for 2011's Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. It was Paramount's initial wish for Ghost Protocol to transition Cruise away from the franchise's lead and replace him with Jeremy Renner. Cruise brought in screenwriter Christopher McQuarrie, whom he had instantly connected with while making Valkyrie, to do an uncredited rewrite which, among other things, changed the ending to have Cruise's character remain a field agent. These story changes, combined with the film's massive critical and commercial success — it was Cruise's highest-grossing film of his career up until that point — are largely credited with saving Tom Cruise's career and securing his relationship with Paramount. While starring in films for other studios like Edge of Tomorrow and The Mummy, the next decade saw a return to the close relationship between Cruise and Paramount. Not only did they produce 2 more Mission Impossible films directed by Christopher McQuarrie, but also the 2 mildly successful Jack Reacher films, on which Paula Wagner served as a producer.
The crowning achievement of his collaboration, and some might argue Cruise's career, came with the release of 2022's Top Gun Maverick. The long-awaited sequel was a smash critical and box office success, largely credited with revitalizing moviegoing after the COVID-19 pandemic. It broke several box office records, was the only Cruise film to ever gross more than $1 billion, and the second highest grossing movie in Paramount's history, only behind Titanic. With that major success, expectations were high for Cruise and Paramount's next collaboration, 2023's Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. However, due to a variety of factors including an inflated budget caused by the pandemic and a release date only a week before Barbie and Oppenheimer, the film massively underperformed at the box office.
Now, as Tom Cruise announces his new partnership with Warner Bros. Discovery, it seems his decades-long relationship with Paramount may be at an end. Insiders say that Cruise was frustrated with how much he had to fight with Paramount to keep Top Gun Maverick off of streaming during the pandemic and following its release in theaters. While he may have triumphed with Maverick, he also unsuccessfully lobbied Paramount executives to move Dead Reckoning's opening to not compete with the Barbenheimer phenomenon. With Cruise and his creative partners teasing a new phase in his career, and the next Mission Impossible seemingly being the last with his involvement, it remains to be seen what will come from a partnership between Hollywood's most influential star and today's most famously volatile movie studio.
Man, oh man, he's the power that he is going to wield at Warner Brothers, I feel like, is going to... I assume that's why he took such a massive deal, is that he won't have to grovel to so many higher-ups. Maybe he's going to be able to make some of the decisions as a filmmaker that he knows is going to just generally benefit the projects that he is a part of. And if anybody is going to have that kind of inside knowledge of that super weird flip-floppy studio system, I think Tom Cruise has a pretty first-hand knowledge that I think is actually very valuable in that role. So it's interesting to look back at how strange and all over the place that his career has led him to work with these studios.
And he definitely had some missteps along the way, both, personally, certainly, but also professionally. And it's very interesting to see that, despite all of that, and especially following his 2011 recombination with Paramount, that he's the last movie star with anywhere near that kind of juice. He has so much power in a way that most stars do not, and I think that he's been very vocal on kind of like an alternate lens of trying to help young stars gain that kind of power to be smarter about their decisions. I know that he gave a lot of advice to people like Jeremy Renner and Henry Cavill on Mission Impossible movies, and that also he really wants to promote all of the guys from the Top Gun movies at like the younger folks. And so it's really, really interesting to see that this is probably him entering the last phase of his career, and how is he going to choose to wield that power as he goes out, basically.
I'm looking forward to it a lot, to see what he can do in that position. Like you said, especially during the Maverick run of things, and knowing like how he worked with all of these young actors and how much they like when they were speaking about him and his methods and his advice and the way what it is to work with him, it seems like he's ready for that kind of guidance role. I'm just very excited to see what he's going to do with that. He seems to have the eye. He's got the it factor. He's got the chutzpah to lead Hollywood back to where it needs to be, I think.
I hope that he's able to straighten out Warner Brothers Discovery a little bit. Maybe Zaslav will get kicked out of there, but that's a fool's dream.
It could be, there can be only one style. Maybe Tom Cruise will take the throne at some point.
But why don't we go ahead and move on over to Save the Rec Center?
Let's do it.
Save the Rec Center!
Now it's time to Save the Rec Center, where we give you our weekly recommendations. Garrett, what do you got for me this week?
I recently watched on the Criterion Channel the 1962 samurai movie Sanjuro, starring Toshiro Mifune and directed by the legendary Akira Kurosawa. It is technically a sequel to the earlier film Yojimbo, which is famously the basis for Fistful of Dollars, but I think it certainly stands on its own, and I was really blown away by how a movie that is essentially the same story beat repeated multiple times, and also just a lot of talking in rooms. It's such a thrilling, exciting action movie. I watched it specifically because I was kind of having a Star Wars itch, and I was like, but I want to watch something that's not Star Wars. I wanted to see one of the influences of Star Wars, which I think you can probably relate to that feeling sometimes.
Oh,
and
definitely, yeah.
I was certainly not disappointed. It is currently streaming on Criterion Channel, but I also believe it is on Canopy for those who have that through their local library.
Yeah, that's one that I've always wanted to see. I just got my Seven Samurai Criterion for Christmas. I'm very excited to, dive into all those supplements and stuff. But I know those are both of those ones you were just mentioning are two that I've always wanted to dive into a little more. I've got less knowledge in that realm than I feel like I should, but I know those are like heralded as absolutely some of the best of the era.
But Seamus, what do you have this week?
Well, the other thing I got for Christmas, movie-wise this year, was the Scream Factory special They Live 4K, which is just an absolute treat. I think this is one of the most slept on Carpenter movies because it doesn't have old Kurt Russell in it, but it does have Rowdy Piper and Keith David, young, amazing action heroes that they are in this movie. It influenced so much weird, campy, sci-fi stuff, and it was influenced by so much really grotesque, bizarre sci-fi stuff, as John Carpenter's work often is, but it's nonstop fun and weird. It's maybe undersung because it's so weird and feels like it's spinning its wheels of just like running around doing crazy sci-fi action stuff, but the creature designs are phenomenal. The 45-minute fist fight scene in the alley where Rowdy Piper's trying to get Keith David to put on the sunglasses is truly iconic. It is one of my favorite fight scenes in cinema history. It's overall a blast, and I couldn't recommend it more. I'm sure you've seen They Live, right, Garrett? That's not what I have to tell you.
Actually, somehow no.
Oh,
dude.
Dude.
As a Carpenter boy, I am ashamed of it, but I think I'm gonna have to implore you to bring that 4K over sometime.
I am good. I'll watch it literally anytime with you. I just watched it over the holidays, but I'm ready to like today to watch this with you. It is one of my favorites, and I think if it were a Kurt Russell role, like it feels like it could be, but Rowdy Piper brings so much as like this vagrant kind of a bum dude just wandering around that stumbles into this position. It's phenomenal, and I highly recommend it.
Oh, I'm excited to watch it.
But that wraps up the show this week. If you want to reach us on social media, that's at @PCR_podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find us and like our page on Facebook, and you can email us directly at popculturereferencepod@gmail.com.
Next week, we'll be talking about Jason Statham's The Beekeeper.
Yes, we are. I was hoping you'd bust out the Statham voice, which, honestly, both of us don't have a very good Statham.
Well, Guess we're gonna have to fix that then.
Instant bailout. We'll have a better one. We have better Stathams immediately post Statham movie viewing, so I think we'll come around on it a little more.
I'm psyched. I've been psyched about this movie since we saw the trailer before something like 4 months ago.
It was like a Last Voyage of Demeter or some random one that we don't remember.
But we're seeing it. We're seeing it in IMAX. It'll be our first 2024 movie, I think. So
yeah, wait, you saw Aquaman 2, didn't you?
That came out at Christmas though. So
oh my god, time is so weird. It's like we're going into the wormhole in Monarch right now. Time is very strange.
But I'm very excited to talk about The Beekeeper next week.
Adios, amigos.